Welcome to the eCom Collab Club podcast, where operators, risk takers, and battle-tested founders drop the lessons that cost them time, money, and their sanity, and share what actually works so you don't have to pay the same price. Hosted by Peter Gardner and Adam Pierce, founders of the eCom Collab Club and Blend Commerce, the Shopify CRO agency, and proudly sponsored by OmniSend. Email and SMS marketing so good, it's boring.
So guys, ghost orders, 2-star reviews that start with love the look, but then you get the dreaded never shopping here again. Now, is customer feedback just a parade of complaints and demands, or is it actually the world's best growth hack? If you know how to listen. Now, the thing is, today I am joined by someone who has been through every kind of feedback storm. Jodie Sanders, CMO at Pooky Lighting. Now, she's grown a brand that's literally all about how you see things. So who better to shed some light on what customers really think and turn her opinions into e-commerce rocket fuel. So welcome to the show, Jodie. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
And just before we do get started, obviously, we did have a bit of a technical screw up this morning. So my apologies, guys, that we are a few minutes late starting. It wasn't you, it was all my side. But Jodie, I'm going to start with a very serious and very eloquently worded question here. Who the fuck actually are you and what do you do?
That is a very, very good question. My favorite intro icebreaker ever.
Good.
So I am, in short, marketing, brand development, NPD, brand extension expert, I guess. I've been doing it for a very long time now, nearly 25 years. All of my experience is in the home space. That could be ceramics. I've done a lot of China. Now, obviously, working in lighting with Pooky, so lots of home lifestyle and also a couple of beauty brands along the way.
And what was, in terms of, I guess, home and lifestyle, is there anything particularly about the industry that pulled you towards that versus other verticals within this kind of e-com world that we work and live in?
So I have always been a home bird, I guess. And I was, confession time. I know this isn't like one of those therapy podcasts, but I'm going to go there.
If you want it to be.
I was that, 7-8-year-old that, when I was asked what I want to have for my birthday or for Christmas, it would be like, can I redecorate my bedroom? Can I paint my walls? Can I have some artwork? So not hugely popular, as you can guess. Didn't have many friends, but did have a really, really beautiful bedroom. So yeah, and I think that it's just that. And to be honest, I did fall into it a little bit by accident. I was convinced I wanted to work in fashion. I've always been very, very interested in design and creative industries, but had my heart set on working in fashion. And then very, very randomly, an opportunity came about literally just as I'd finished uni, which I was recommended for by one of my lecturers, which was working at that point, a government funded project working with ceramic companies to enlighten them, I guess, about design and marketing. And at that point, it was just when brands like Wedgwood, who I eventually went on to work for, a bit of a full circle moment, brands like Wedgwood were working with Jasper Conran and Vera Wang. And so that was kind of I went into ceramics almost because of the fashion partnership part of it, which really kind of fascinated me, and the whole kind of celebrity endorsement thing. So yeah, that was a little bit of an accident, and then I got into really loving the whole kind of craft and the heritage of it. So yeah, I worked in ceramics in one way or another, probably for the last kind of 20-ish years. I'm aging myself.
Just say it quickly, it doesn't quite count as much.
We'll gloss over that.
I mean, look, today, in terms of this podcast, what we want to talk about today is feedback. And we brought up the subject of feedback a few times on the podcast. But I think what's interesting is that I still feel that generally, you know, with the clients that I work with and the conversations we have at eCom Collab Club, there's two issues of feedback. One is, I think that number one, people don't know generally how to ask for it. And secondly, they're scared of asking for it. And thirdly, it's when you do get feedback, what the hell do you actually do with it? So I want to kind of touch on, I guess, all of those things today. I think what I want to start off with, though, is kind of thinking back on sort of your career to date. Has there ever kind of been, you know, a piece of customer feedback that has completely blindsided you to that point where you're like, geez, like, where the hell did that come from? You know, what is happening here? Maybe kind of take us through that moment in terms of what the impact was from both maybe a business and kind of a personal view as well.
Yeah, so I completely agree with what you're saying. I think that there is, it's natural to be hesitant about getting feedback. You know, we all have that whole piece around, you know, how uncomfortable it is to have criticism, and, you know, everybody strives for perfection. Nobody goes into work and says, I'm really planning on fucking up today. Like, people are absolutely always trying to do the right thing and the best thing for their customers, for their brand, for their business, for their bottom line. But what I think is really fascinating is that for me, when I really look back on it, there hasn't ever been any feedback that I would say has completely blindsided me. I think that it's almost kind of worst fears realized. In hindsight, I mean, at the time, it can be really like, God, that doesn't make any sense. What are they talking about, really? But then when you actually try to unpick it, and one of the examples that I'm thinking about is during my time at Wedgwood. And, you know, when you're so in a brand, and, you know, lots of our messaging was around, and we knew that people were starting to dine in a more informal way. You know, people were eating out of bowls with spoons more than they were eating out of, you know, fine china with a knife and fork, and, you know, being ever so polite at having their butler bring them their dinner in the evening, having their nanny tuck them into bed. So, you know, we knew that the landscape was changing, but I think that, you know, when we got the customer feedback via research agencies, so it was relatively kind of formalized, and the idea that people did not buy our product because they were scared of it. You know, it was something that they had, and actually quite an emotional reaction to. And by that, I mean the idea that Wedgwood plates, Wedgwood china is something that is in your grandma's cupboard. No one's allowed to touch it in case it gets broken. And it only comes out on special occasions. And it is like so sacred. And there's almost a kind of an irony to that of the product is so sacred that nobody wants to use it. And what we knew, and I think the learning for me from a business perspective, but also much more from a personal one, is that you have always got to remember that not everybody thinks like you, and not everybody knows what you know. So for us internally at Wedgwood, living with the product all the time, understanding all of the manufacturing processes, understanding the chemical makeup of bone china, understanding that it's really strong, and it's actually quite difficult, you know, it's quite difficult to break. Knowing that, we took for granted that other people would know that as well. And I think what we had done is that we had almost leaned in too much to the idea of heritage and to the idea of you will know about this brand because it's been in your family forever. And we took that only as a positive thing. It's been in your family forever. You know this. And it will evoke memories for you that are really, really positive. Whereas actually what was happening is that it was evoking memories almost in a negative way that, well, I don't want to buy that because it's impractical, because I'm never going to use it, because it's scary, because it will break, because it's so precious that it's actually, you know, in this day and age, when people have got smaller houses, they don't have that disposable income, they don't eat in the way that, you know, that you would have done 50 years ago. So there were lots and lots of layers of that, which I think, and I'm sure that we'll kind of touch on it as we go on, as I talk for the next hour, that I think what really, really good feedback and responding to feedback in the most positive way is about using it to start to unpick the layers. It's almost like that one question, which is actually my absolute work, like living with me is a nightmare because I ask questions about everything. And every question leads to another 2 questions. But I think that's the point. You know, if you ask the right questions, they should lead to more questions. It should lead to you being able to unpick, to peel off the layers, to really understand what's going on. And that does mean that sometimes it is a little bit of a test. You might not ask the right questions. It has to then become a very regular and a very iterative process. But I think, you know, like I said, that's the kind of learning for me is you can really take for granted when you work in a business and you are surrounded by it all day, every day, and it is your life, that everything that you know is really obvious to other people.
I think what's interesting as well, like you're making me think about, is that when you talk about feedback in e-commerce, a lot of the time, I think it is about more of, you mentioned layers, and I think it's more on the superficial side of, you know, look, what did you think of the product? You know, did it do X thing for you? I suppose what you're talking about though here in that example of Wedgwood, and I guess this is maybe where some of that fear comes, is it's like, from a societal perspective, are people doing the things that they used to do? And therefore, is my product generally as a product still relevant for their lives? I guess that's quite a confronting thing to do, isn't it? I suppose from that business perspective, it probably felt a little bit scary to go, actually, yeah, people aren't thinking this is the thing that they get out every Sunday anymore. And I just wonder whether that's kind of like maybe some of the fear that, like, am I still relevant as a product? But I guess like you guys showed there, yes, there was a change in your marketing, but it didn't mean the end of the road for you.
Absolutely. And I think that again, all feedback is only useful if you do something with it. So in that example, I think it allowed us to focus. Don't get me wrong. This is not like the single turning point in a 260-year-old brand, but there are these glimpses of, oh shit, but actually, let's see if we can figure out a way to then become more relevant, to create products that are more usable, to think about how can we then become more of a gifting brand or more of an interiors brand? How do we license the brand into other categories? If people do want to buy into the brand, it just might not be in the way that their grandparents bought into the brand. And so I think that, again, that's part of an evolution that we should all be kind of questioning. And I don't think that that's just for eCom, but we have to, you just can't sit still. You can't become complacent that what we're doing is perfectly fine. We never have to change it. People are happy, because the world moves on, and I think that unless you really have, and even for brands that have been around for as long as that, you have got to remember that every pound spent is a new, it's a new commitment to the brand. And if you're not being, if you're not relevant in that specific moment, it doesn't matter what you've done for the 260 years before that. So, and that is confronting and it is scary. But I think, like I said, it's about reframing and having that, and as a perfectionist, that's really, really, I'm speaking about myself, not everybody. But as a perfectionist, that's really difficult, because you do take it so personally. Like I said, you have that, the initial reaction can absolutely be, oh, idiots, they don't know anything, who are they to say? And then you, like I said, when you start unpicking, then you actually get to the point where you're like, they might have got a point.
On that note, actually, I think, maybe like with Pooky now, it's like, look, we, in every business, there are going to be some products or some campaigns that don't go the way that you want to, or you get, maybe some lukewarm or maybe some negative feedback. From the point of view of the team, so from the product team, founders, sales, marketing, in terms of those individuals, who do you think finds it hardest to accept feedback and sees it more as criticism rather than, okay, let's actually go and make a change here?
I think, founders, because again, and I'm not just talking about, Pooky's founder, who was actually very, very, very pragmatic compared to others that I have worked with, no names. But I think, it's, again, it comes down to, I think, the people that really, really, really care. It doesn't necessarily matter what department you're in, what function you are managing. But I think that, that whole idea of you take it very personally. So, our customer services team at Pooky are totally brilliant. And Rowan, our founder, has made an absolute commitment from day one that customer service is going to be the cornerstone of our business. And that means that we have, we're all about there being humans on the end of the phone. Absolutely. If you've got a problem, if something that's wrong with your product, perhaps something's arrived and it's not what you thought it would be, or something's been broken, or yada yada. Even if you've had that product for like 2 months and you decide, actually it's not really working for me, I've never installed it and now my plans have changed, then this is Rowan's principle of no problem, we'll fix it for you, we'll figure it out. And as a business, it's actually not that hard to do, but it is about that mindset of, do you know what? Our job is to sell beautiful things to people who have given us their trust and who have given us their money. Two things that people don't give away very easily.
Right.
And that I think, we have got to do the right thing by them. And that, I as a marketer, as the CMO of Pooky, yes, I take that feedback personally. We sent out, this is actually quite a funny example. We sent out a trade catalogue on direct mail recently, and it's the first piece of direct mail trade that we've ever done. And the book's like this thick. And Lucy, our totally incredible senior marketing manager, no one's allowed to poach her because she's mine and she's staying. She worked absolutely tirelessly on this brochure, and we were thinking about, what is it that people will really want to know? Lots and lots of our products come in multiple sizes. So, it might be that we've got, I don't know, like a picture light SKU that comes in 3 different sizes. We then made the decision not to put all of the different sizes into the brochure because we wanted it to be beautiful. We wanted to make sure that, the pictures were there, the prices were there. And then we kind of figured, people are relatively smart. If they like the look of that thing, they'll go to the website. They can pull down all of the product specs, all of the technical drawings, yada, yada. And we received an email the day that the catalogue landed, and we were all like so hyped about it. It was like, yeah, we've done this amazing thing. And somebody had written into our customer services team to say that they had just received the catalogue, and although it looked nice, they could only assume that whoever had put the brochure together was either incompetent or stupid.
Oh no.
Because we didn't have every single dimension, like a height, depth, width for every single option that was in the book. And I can tell, I did some swearing. Hi, if you're listening. And we had a bit of a laugh about the fact that, oh, what are we being stupid today, or are we just being incompetent? Because you have got to, you have got to laugh about that stuff as well.
Yeah.
Otherwise it would make you go crazy. But it's also, it's a learning, at that, for that specific customer, we didn't give him what he needed at that moment in time. The way that he responded to that could have been, it was,
yeah, 3 out of 10.
Yeah, it was impolite, the way, his response was impolite. But, it's something that we will absolutely take on board. And it might be that we say, well, do you know what? We're going to keep doing things as we do them. It's one person. And I think that that's the other thing as well, is that you've got to be really mindful of, is this a constant piece of feedback that we are getting over a period of time? Or is it one person's opinion? And one person's opinion can absolutely be super valuable. But I think that that's, again, where you've got to be able to take that step back, be pragmatic and say, okay, is this somebody who perhaps, might have been, he was just having one of those like falling down days and everything was going to, that was just the one thing that like tipped him over the edge. He'd been caught in a, in a traffic jam, and he, couldn't get breakfast at McDonald's because it was, 1 minute past 11, or, it's, you've absolutely got to take some of that stuff with a pinch of salt. But I think that you've also got to be open to the idea that one person can shed light on a problem, on a gap in a way that you otherwise wouldn't see. And another really good example of that, like the kind of the positive take on that one person's example. And I have spoken about this before. When I was at Birchbox, I was at a conference and was walking into the conference, and they zap your badges, and I kind of held up my badge to be scanned, and the lady working on the door, who had nothing to do with nothing to do with the conference subject matter, she said, "Oh, Birchbox." She said, "Yeah, my daughter used to get that." And I was like, "Oh, fab, that's really nice to hear, blah, blah." And she said, "Yeah, but we had to cancel it because it just kept coming." And I was like, "Well, it's a subscription service." What that then taught us, when I went back to the office and I was like, I had the most interesting piece of feedback today. What that actually then allowed us to do, I guess it just kind of like scratched the surface, and it sparked a broader conversation of, do people actually know? Because at Birchbox, we had two different strands of the business. So we had the boxes, which, and that was all subscription led. And then there was also an e-commerce element to the business. And I think a lot of people had thought that you could buy into a box. And that when they got that, we used to do a lot of price promo. And yeah, I mean, more price than added value on first box offers, on the basis, obviously, that, someone's going to get their first box and then they've bought into the subscription and the brand and the experience, blah, blah. And I think that small print of, when it was like, get your first box for £10, people just thought it was a box for £10. Well, that sounds good. I'll get that. And it did actually lead us on to a wider piece of research and a wider piece of comms around the fact that this is a subscription, and kind of building that into, on an emotional level, building that into, for our target customer, this is a moment for you every month. And that actually being the thing that we were selling, more than it being a subscription box. So like I said, you have the sample sizes of one that can be super, annoying. And, like if somebody says, well, I bought this X, Y, or Z, and, the color just doesn't really match my kitchen in the way that I thought it would. And you're like, okay, don't really know what to tell you. but then you do get the other sample sizes of one, which are actually like, okay, that's gonna let me do some more digging around and kind of figure out, because then you think, well, if that's happening once, it probably is happening again, because it's only really the people that are having the falling down day that are ever going to tell you through those kind of chat, like through your kind of formal channels. And again, that's one of the things that I always think that we have to do. And it's not always easy in an ecom. If you're a pure ecom business, it's not always easy, because you don't necessarily to interact with your customers in the same way that you can if you are a bricks and mortar retailer. But I think that speaking to people and observing them in the space that is relevant to you is so valuable. I have spent a lot of my time over the years kind of weirdly creeping around in homeware departments, listening to what people are saying. And you know, that is where the really fascinating stuff happens for me, because, you know, it takes a certain type of person, a certain type of problem, or a certain type of kind of emotional reaction, perhaps, to be the person that's actually like, I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to tell somebody what I think, or I'm going to write an email and I'm going to tell them what I think. So much of it is about talking to people and really trying to understand them, so that you get those glimpses of, I mean, like I said, that lady, going back to that Birchbox example, I can't imagine that she would have ever, you know, they just cancelled the box because it kept coming. She wouldn't have ever formalized that communication to us. So I think, you know, it's have your eyes and ears open, basically.
So I think basically, you know, what I'm hearing is like, have your eyes and ears open in different places and all the time, but equally as well, when you are getting those complaints, you know, it is going to be a numbers game, and you need to kind of investigate those things that do come into you. I suppose what I'm also interested in is, when in any of the companies where you worked at, when you've kind of had feedback that has been recurring, and it kind of has been time to sort of make a change, has there been any examples where there's been like you know, a consistent feedback that's gone, right, okay, we're going to change the product, or we're going to change the site, we're going to maybe change policy? Like, has there been any situations where that has kind of led to something that's been more tangible?
Yeah, definitely. And there's a couple of examples that I can think of. So at Pooky, we have absolutely built over the last couple of years a real culture of research and a culture of listening to customers. And not that wasn't happening before in more of a kind of ad hoc way, but now we actually have got a regular schedule of research that we do on qual and on quant. And that, I think, has really helped us, because we have a benchmark. So we know kind of whether or not any of the stuff that we're doing, changing, is actually making a difference in the way that we think it should. Some core research that we did a couple of years ago now has been really insightful, because what it has allowed us to do is to really segment our customers into 3 different types of shopper. And by doing that, it allows not only us from a marketing perspective to understand those customers better and to give them more targeted messages, but it's also allowed us to think about, well, what's the user experience like on the website for each of those types of customers? So if you're one of our interiors obsessives, you are likely to be spending more time browsing. You understand the terminology. You have a view on, you know, you're likely to be much more confident about making your choices. If you're a more functional shopper who isn't really bought into the brand, they're still very valuable to us. And what we want to do is to make sure that at that point in time that they decide, oh, you know, my desk light just broke, I need another desk light, that Pooky is top of mind and that we're their preferred option. But they will want to navigate the site in a very, very different way because they just don't care as much. And again, I think that that's, you know, I work in a marketing team where, and you know, we all really care, and we are all there because we love interiors. We know the terminology, we know the trend, we have a really clear, confident view on what kind of aesthetic we want to have in our own homes, etc., etc. So again, I think that it's really important when you get that kind of information that you use it in a way, you know, I think being a good marketer for me, and again, you know, whether that's eCom, whether it's a retail business, whether it's, you know, purely on the brand side, it is about people, it's about empathy, it's about being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes in that moment. So if I don't, you know, you kind of have to strip the layers away from yourself to get into someone else's head. If I don't give a shit about interiors and I don't read every single interiors magazine, and actually all I'm looking for is a new small desk lamp, what journey am I going on? What information can we give that person to make that process easier, to make them feel empowered that they are still making the right decision? And so I think that that's what, you know, at a very, very core level, that foundational piece of information that we have, and we do review it, we do make sure that, you know, are they still our core 3 groups of customers? That foundational information really then does allow us to, and we disseminate that across the whole of the business so that everybody can then start to apply it to their area. So that's absolutely relevant in product design. It's absolutely relevant in UX. It's absolutely relevant in comms. Even, you know, even when we get into a customer service realm, how we respond to different customers, if we can try and figure out, you know, what kind of customer are they? They might need a different type of support from us. So that, I think, is really, like I said, it's something that kind of sits. Being a customer first business, you have, you know, it's bloody obvious, isn't it? But you've just got to really understand your customers. And again, I think, you know, going in terms of kind of things that you're not necessarily expecting to hear. One of the things, again, at Birchbox, and this happened pre me joining, but I always thought it was really fascinating that every month before the box was going to launch, they would do these like teasers of this is in, you know, this is what you can expect to get in the box, and they talk about specific products and blah, blah, blah. And then the feedback that came back, and this was from Instagram. So this is, or Instagram and Facebook. So again, it's a different mechanism. It's not somebody that's phoning you. It's not somebody that's like taking the time to email you. So again, you've got to look everywhere for it. But the feedback was like, oh, don't tell us. We love having the surprise. So then actually that meant that the team really took a step back from that approach of, and the thinking was absolutely correct, that we are more likely to get people to buy into this product if they know exactly what they're getting. The converse was true. People bought into the surprise, and actually they wanted to have that moment of discovery themselves when they opened the box. And so again, you know, I don't think that and both, I guess, both approaches are completely logical.
Yeah.
They both make sense. And I think that this is where you know, like I said, you have absolutely got to listen everywhere. And whether that is Facebook, Instagram, being a weird creep going around shops, or, you know, or that very, or then kind of into the more formal methods of, you know, what emails are you getting from your, you know, through your customer service channels? What feedback do you get via your research agencies? You know, it's everywhere.
And I think the other thing, going back to, you know, you were saying before about the guy who made the comment about the obviously the catalog that went out.
Do we have to touch on that again?
Well, no, I mean, just very briefly, but I think, I'm more generally interested in, like, has there been any times where you've kind of had, and you mentioned sort of Instagram and Facebook there a moment ago too, is like, has there been any times when there's been quite a negative or vocal critic that you've been able to then sort of turn around and then turn into sort of an asset? I know there are a lot of companies now that, sort of tend to do very well when they've had a negative review, but they respond very positively and they demonstrate that. I'm just wondering, like, have you had that experience too with the companies you work with?
Yeah, and I think Pooky is a really, really good example. And, like I said, Rowan, our founder, has absolutely instilled a complete sense of, the customer is king. And our customer service team are totally attuned to that. And it might be that somebody is saying like I said, our formal returns process states, you have to return a product in 30 days. We have people regularly, 35, 40, 60, maybe even longer. And Rowan's principle has always been, make it right. And I think that, again, that trust piece, then that can't just be a one-off. That has to be something that you're really living and breathing. And I think that, it's not then so much an individual example, but I think all of us as consumers can relate to there having been an experience in our own shopping history whereby we've had an experience with a brand that has been negative, and we have had that turned around by somebody. And actually, I think, it's very much one of those, I think it comes down to the human condition, really. It's, you put your hands up, you go, we fucked up, we're really sorry, that shouldn't have happened. Please let us know how we can put it right. And like I said, that's not, any specific example of we only do that, in X, Y, and Z circumstances. It's kind of across the board, it is about repaying that trust that somebody put in the brand. And I think that people generally are good people, and they want the right result, and they are forgiving, and they don't want to be awkward. They don't, there are definitely some that, are just phoning up for a fight. But I think generally, people are just looking for a solution, and it might be frustrating. It might be frustrating that I know that you told me not to get my electrician out before I knew that this thing was absolutely right, but that's the only slot that he had. And now this thing has arrived and I can't get him to fit it, and it's going to cost me money and blah, blah, blah. And, I can you can understand why they're frustrated, and I think that that's the point of, you kind of need to understand. And I think, again, that does come down to a bit of a kind of understanding consumers is about understanding people, right? It's people, if you listen, if you understand, and then you say, let me help you to figure out this issue, this frustration, even if you can't solve the whole problem. I think that people are then like, okay, you just don't ever want to be that, computer says no company.
Yeah.
And I think, again, that's where Rowan has been so smart, is that he's really empowered people within our business to put it right. If we have to send a free product to somebody, Rowan's not going to be on the phone going, oh my, that's money down the drain, blah, blah, blah. It's, you did the right thing. You put it right. That's good. Do that again. So
and I guess the thing, for you guys at Pooky as well is that, a lot of the time it's never, your average order value is relatively high in terms of from an eCom point of view.
Yeah.
You are going to get repeat purchases because typically, your customers are, doing all of the lighting in the house, or they're working on a project or the interior designer. So it doesn't make sense not to. One of the things I want to ask you, like with your phone, I guess with your marketing hat on, is what about taking it further from a marketing point of view when you do screw up and then using that as a marketing message. So, I mean, look, everyone always still talks about the whole KFC thing where they ran out of chicken.
Yeah.
They rearranged, obviously, KFC to, I think it was FCK. What's your take on that in terms of when companies do it? Good, bad? Yeah.
I mean, I think it very much depends on it depends. That's not a helpful answer, but it depends. I think a brand like KFC, with the brand voice that they have, with the audience that they have, with, particularly, at that point in time, there were people that were phoning the police saying, I've just been to KFC and there's no chicken. And, I think owning that, I think owning the humor in that. And like I said, I think it comes down to that sense of honesty, which I think that we're seeing much, much more with brands these days, and much more with the kind of relationship that brands have with consumers and vice versa, that there is something that's very endearing and very, very positive about that honesty. We've just had a situation at work where there was a failing in our demand planning software. We ended up with lots more chandeliers in our UK warehouse than we were expecting to have. And we sent out an email on Monday that said, oops, we've ordered too many. That's bad for us, but it's good for you. We're putting them on sale, help us out. It's good for, and again, Lucy wrote the copy and it was brilliant, but, very much, quite self-effacing, quite, again, hands up, we messed up, but, if you like us, will you please buy a chandelier? And by the way, 50% off pooky.com. And, and I think that people really respond to that, because we can't as brands want to be human when everything is going right, but then not want to be human when things go wrong. And I think that's that core message. And I think it depends on what kind of brand you are as to how playful you can be about that. And, if I don't know, if Pooky ran out of light bulbs, I don't know that we would be able to approach it in exactly the same way. People probably wouldn't be phoning the police either. So, I think you've just got to, as a brand owner, really understand your voice, understand your customers, and gauge it from there. But I think that it is part of the trend that we're seeing. And perhaps not. It's not even a trend. It's like a kind of re-consumerism that.
Yeah.
We're expecting brands to be more human. So
definitely. I mean, I think, we've talked about this a little bit with eCom Collab, where we have brands sort of talking about like employee generated content, and, sort of that move now to people sharing, more of the inner workings of a business through their marketing.
Yeah.
The founders, the people that are running, the people that are doing, being more of the face of brands. And I think maybe kind of, 10, 15 years ago, that was kind of reserved for people that were, like crafted products. People were showing then like the craftsmen in the workshop. But now it's like, even in service-based businesses, they're bringing those people to the forefront. And I guess it's the same thing here. It's like, look, it is warts and all. We are going to show you everything. And that includes when we do cock up as well. Yeah.
And like I said, you have got to pick and choose your moments in that, because again, we don't want that to necessarily become, too often. We don't want all of our messaging to be, we did it again. But
that's like guys who write, do we? You don't need to make it up that you're actually incompetent.
I mean, there's already one person out there that thinks I'm either incompetent or stupid. So, I'm going to say there's definitely more than one person actually, but that's fine. They're wrong. I think there's something very interesting about how we, we're doing it a lot more now, actually. Our Instagram feed. Well, you just got a little glimpse of the cat there. My Instagram feed, our Pooky Instagram feed, I should say, is full of. This is our team in the Chelsea showroom. Even just last week, I think it was. We had a little story about Emmy, who works in our marketing team, and this is her favorite lamp, and we do that content. And again, I think that people do really like it. They want to kind of get that glimpse. I guess it's like how we've moved on from behind the scenes footage of photo shoots, which was actually always still quite polished, and now we are into that being a bit more real. But I think that it's nice for people to know who's behind the brand.
And I think also maybe for you guys, look, you guys obviously have a lot of competitors who are not doing the things that you're doing, and are maybe manufacturing and selling in ways that you are very firmly removed from. And I guess you showing that you do have a team and you have real people, and it's not just the face of drop ship product. That probably helps as well, doesn't it?
Yeah. And again, when Rowan founded the brand 11 years ago, it speaks so much about him. And he's a very approachable, creative, interesting, quirky person. And the brand has been created and developed in a way that is very, very authentic to him. And so I think that does make it easier, because it's not a brand that's been you keep, I'm totally horrified. This makes me, I'm going to sound like I'm completely ancient, and this is definitely a whole nother podcast. But I'm horrified by these stories that you see about AI. Oh, I put into AI that I wanted to start a brand, and this is what it's called, and then this is what it looks like, and here's the logo. And it's so shallow, and there's nothing behind it. And I think that one of the reasons that Pooky is so successful, and again, this is another podcast in itself, is because it's authentic, is because it comes very, very much from Rowan. And that's what we have all bought into as part of, as his team, and what we will continue to carry on for as long as we're allowed to. That we have that kind of say, what would Rowan do?
But I think in a way, it's like surely that is a much easier way as well to run a business with authenticity, because I think that's the thing that we've always tried to do with Blend as well, is sort of we talk like how we talk in conversation in our agency. And I think when you are like you say, you're creating maybe a brand guideline or a persona that isn't natural to the people that are in the organization, you've got to keep maybe running back to that kind of second brain for AI to get the next answer. That must be exhausting as well to do and to run a business like that.
Yeah. And I think that, I've worked for lots of founder-led brands, and, Pooky is a great example of the tone of voice. If you were to read any of the copy on our website, if you know what Rowan's voice sounds like, it's him. It is the language, the humor, the classical art references, that is him. And the same with Jamie Oliver when I was working there, and I know that he always used to get a lot of shit over the whole, like pucker thing, and, but he's a real person. And I think that is, it's so important if you are, and you can be a brand that is not in the least bit like authentic, and that's totally fine. But I do think that it's very challenging if you try and pretend to be an authentic brand, but then there's actually no kind of action that sits behind that. So yeah, another podcast for sure.
I love it. I suppose from a perspective of like practical day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, you mentioned about research agencies, and that's the bit I want to get onto now. It's like from as a system or routine point of view, what do you kind of have in place to get that feedback coming in the first place? So are there maybe 3 or 4 things you could walk us through that you do with Pooky to get that and elicit that and then understand it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the first caveat that I will give is that, we are now a very well-established, very profitable eCom focused business. And that is great because it means that as CMO, I have got a budget for research. So I'm very conscious that a lot of the people that are listening might not have that. So again, that's where you have to be a bit more scrappy. You have to go and do the listening in the shops. You have to be trawling your Instagram feeds. You have to be asking people that, pick up the phone to your customers, ask people that you're at a party with, have you ever bought our brand? Have you ever bought into our category? I think, again, that's where your eyes and your ears have always got to be open. The thing with Pooky, like I said, we're very lucky in that we have got budget set aside. It hasn't always been that way, of course, but we do a YouGov piece of quant research every year. We work with a brilliant agency called Cream on that for the UK and for the US. And then we also do our own consumer research, which we do through a survey, like a Survey Monkey, that we send out on email. And then we can overlay that on our transactional data so that we can see what correlates, basically. But again, like I'd said, that's all what I would call that's the really kind of formalized data. And that's when we go into the big, presentation decks and, all of that stuff. I think that the other bit that we still do is, Rowan still looks pretty much at all of our customer emails. So he's constantly logged into Gorgeous, which is the platform that we use in the UK and in the US, and is just watching. And again, it's some of that stuff, some of the research that we do is very, very scientific, and some of the research that we do isn't. It is just listening and being open to it. Like I was saying, it's even when people are saying something that you don't necessarily want to hear, it's about listening to it.
Because I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's the end of the day, let's face it, it's messy, isn't it? It's messy asking for it. It's messy analyzing it, and it's messy at the end. And it's I think that's sometimes what can happen is we're especially, I think, on e-commerce side, not I've seen, we are obsessed with processes and SOPs and the fact that we've got to be doing things a certain way. And in reality, like you said there, you kind of need to just be a little bit, okay, we're going to dip into little bits and pieces of everything here and try and find things that we don't necessarily find. Yeah,
it's okay to be scrappy, and it's okay to have, it's okay for research to be ad hoc. It's okay for feedback to come from one person, and like I said, that feedback from the one person might be an outlier. It might be that it's something that no one else, again, it's a very, very funny story. Tell me if we're running out of time, but very funny story. When I was at Jamie Oliver, this email landed on my desk from a man in Germany who was writing to tell me that our packaging was not fit for purpose because he was in a shop and he put his thumb into a potato peeler, and he couldn't get his thumb out without it hurting more and more and more. They had to phone the fire brigade to get the thumb out of the potato peeler. And he wrote in his letter that we should have put on the packaging, don't put your thumb into the potato peeler. So, and it's those sorts of things where you have to go, I can't really mitigate against that, So, there will be the odd random one that you go, that's a you problem.
Do you sell stuff online?
That's absolutely
Do you sell stuff online? Then you need Omnisend. Yes, that OmniSend, the powerful yet refreshingly intuitive email and SMS tool that helps you make $73 on average for every dollar spent. Like watching steady lines go up and up and up? Just automate your email and SMS campaigns with OmniSend. Set it up once, then sit back and watch the sales roll in while you snooze. You're still awake? Then go to omnisend.com/ECC. Give OmniSend a try and start getting sales so steady they'll definitely put you to sleep. Don't forget to use code ECC30 for a 30% discount.
Sorry, Jay, I think you got ate up there by the ad, unfortunately. My apologies.
No,
but,
don't worry.
I've got one more sort of, I guess, core question. Then we've got a couple of quick fire questions, and any other questions from the audience, well, just pop those in the comments, guys. But thinking about, obviously, you know, the year ahead, well, the rest of the year, and obviously going to next year, it wouldn't be e-commerce without me talking about the dreaded two words, which is AI. And you know, I think it lights some people up, it burns other people down. But I guess what I'm thinking about is, from a customer feedback point of view, do you see any opportunities with AI that are going to make things easier and equally better? Or do you feel that it might go the other way, in the sense that it takes people away from the core rationale of what they're actually there to get feedback for?
Again, I think that it is very much, I think it's an it depends answer, because what I fear is, and what I am kind of warning my team about, is this idea of AI can take away your ability to think, and AI can take away your ability to think critically. AI will be totally brilliant in terms of, you know, making it easier to capture information, making it easier to consolidate that information, to be able to say, you know, and what are the most frequently used words or phrases. And I suppose it's kind of, you know, this will be like social listening on steroids. But what I don't think that we can afford to do is to stop listening to actual people and giving people, our customers, a route into our business. Because again, I think it's very much part of the human condition that we want to be heard. And this is why, you know, we do make sure that we've got our team on the end of the phone. There are lots and lots of ways that people can contact us. I think that idea of, again, I don't want to make myself sound completely ancient, but this idea of us kind of detaching ourselves from our consumers and putting AI in the middle, I think is really dangerous. But when it comes to, you know, how do you crunch your data? Fab, you know, use the robot for that. Don't use a person, but make sure that you don't ever lose that connection.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, this is the thing, and it's also on the AI front. I feel like there's two elements of this here. It's doing it in that way around that you spoke about there. Number one, it does mean that people do still think critically. But secondly, as well, from a I guess getting people involved with AI and building up to it, how is the easiest way to get involved with it? And taking something that is mundane, that is administration based, that is task heavy, that is a good way to get people started, rather than trying to go, look, we're going to go out and build an agent that does X, Y, Z thing for us. It's that kind of starting small, but also from a time sat point of view, you end up saving yourself.
Yeah, and again, you know, I think it's all about what's right for your business, what's right for your customer. And I'm not going to be able to sit here and say there is a single approach that will work for every single brand, every single consumer, every single category. You know, it's just, I think that it does come back to that piece of, you know, if you really understand what is important to your customer, you know, because we have also absolutely got, you know, and I'm very, very mindful of it as well, in terms of, you know, how we deal with things at Pooky. Rowan has been absolutely, you know, categorically saying that, you know, we won't have chatbots, we won't use, you know, we won't have robots answering the phone, that they have to be humans. My point of view is also, you know, again, when I think about myself as a consumer, sometimes I don't want to talk to a human. Sometimes I just want somebody, like, if a robot can answer my question in 30 seconds whilst I'm in the middle of a meeting, then great, give me the robot all day long. But I think that it is about understanding your consumers, understanding the touch points, and adapting so that you are doing the thing that you can meet them where they are. And again, I think that is, it's pretty kind of cliched marketing advice, I guess, but that is our job, to be there, to be where our customers are, to be talking to them in the way that they want us to talk to them, to give them the answers that they need. So whichever tools you're using for that, if you're keeping people happy, then you're doing a good job.
100%. And Jay, look, on that note, keeping people happy, you made me very happy because we have literally kind of come to our hour. So we've kind of like hit that time right in the now, which is brilliant.
Right.
So I just want to say, look, thank you so much for joining us today. If people want to obviously find out more about you and Pooky, what should they do? Where should they go?
Well, you can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm not hugely interesting, so manage your expectations. But I am there. Definitely don't bother following me on Instagram because, again, not interesting. But you can follow Pooky Lights and Pooky Lights US on our socials, and you can see all of the brilliant things. And you can also get to know the team there as well.
Fab. Jodie, always a pleasure, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm a little bit upset we didn't get to see the cat because you did tell me the cat was roaming around today, but hey, there we go.
Next time.
Next time for the next one that we do. But thank you so much.
No,
guys,
thanks for
thank
having
you.
me.
No, you're very welcome. And thank you guys for listening in today. If you have liked what you've listened to today, I say do take a look at Pooky and what Jodie's been up to in the team, and do give us a like or a share on the listening platform of your choice. Cheers, guys. And we'll be back with Peter same time next week.
Thanks for listening to the eCom Collab Club podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, and join our community at ecomcollabclub.com/community.